Good morning, everybody. Welcome to this morning's policy breakfast from the National Lottery Community Fund. Apologies, we're a little bit late, as ever in COVID, a few technical issues, but we will get through it. And also noting today's content, really it's a key part of COVID and adds to some of the discussion that we'll be having about staff and volunteer well-being as well. So thank you very much for joining us this morning, and again, welcome. I'm Helen Wyman. I am a head of funding at the National Lottery Community Fund. I actually head up two specific funds, the I Will Fund and the Building Connections Fund, and really have a passion about ensuring that we are working with our staff and our volunteers to support them at this very difficult time. I want to highlight a few housekeeping rules before we start. So there are two functions, and you'll see on the right hand side the chat and the questions. Please do use these as we go through the session. The chat function is there for you just to add anything you want to as we go through, and the Q&A and the questions button on the right hand side you'll see is to ask questions to our speakers, and we have a panel session at the end, so we will do our best to go through those questions. Just to note, we won't be answering questions about funding. So if your question is that you do this amazing thing and you want to be funded for it, which is great, please, we won't be answering those today. We will add into the chat box a link to where you can find more information around that. So please do go in and look at that. Please do keep the conversation going on Twitter. For those of you who are excellent at Twitter, we do have two hashtags going today, and these will be put in the chat box by a colleague shortly as well. So the first one is hashtag TNLComFundEvent, and the second one is hashtag staff and vol wellbeing. So Scott very brilliantly has just posted those in the chat box for you to use. So please do use those as we go ahead. I am really excited about today's session. We have some fantastic speakers who will be sharing their experience and thoughts this morning. So we have Josephine from PACT, Parents and Communities Together lead in Citizens UK. We have Hannah, who is the CEO of the Trevi charity. We have Donna, who is from, I'm going to mispronounce this, Donna, so apologies, Craigavon and Bainbridge Volunteer Bureau. And then we have Charles, who appears to have just been lost, as I was saying, some technical issues. But Charles is one of our young people who's benefited from our talent match program. There we go, Charles has reappeared, who will be sharing their experiences as well. And Colette Taylor, who is the program manager of Talent Match as well. So welcome all, and thank you for your time. We will have the go around for the speakers to share their insights, and then we will open up to a panel session. At that point, we'll also be joined by an evaluation manager from the National Lottery Community Fund, Emily Smeaton, and I will do some introductions to those as we go through. But without further ado, I'm going to remind you, please do type in the chat box. Please do type in questions as we go. But I'm going to hand over to Josephine, who is responsible for the strategic running of the Parent and Communities Together in Southwark. And I'm going to give a bit of a bio, and then she's going to be able to embellish this more. She's an experienced manager with experience of community development and voluntary sector work, including 5 years as an advice worker in the National Association of Citizen Advice Bureau. And PACT, and Parents and Communities Together, is a community-led social support project set up by Citizens UK to empower parents and improve the health and development outcomes for young children. So I will hand over to Josephine. Thank you so much for being here, Josephine.
Thanks, Helen. I don't think I've got anything to add to that fabulous introduction. So yes, I lead the PACT a project in South London. It is a Citizens UK project, and Citizens UK is a community organising charity. So we use volunteers obviously across the organisation, but I'll be focusing on what we do at PACT because that is my area of responsibility. Can we share? Can we start the presentation, please, Scott? Oh, great. So next slide. Next slide, please. So those two images are just to give you an insight of what we are as a community. And, you know, as individuals, we all thrive in different environments, and neither is right or wrong. But you will soon see why I've got those two images, because PACT has a preference for the English garden. Next slide, please. So what is really, we are very lucky because our project is a mental health and well-being project set up for expectant parents and parents of young children. So mental health well-being brings us together as a community. We are a community, everybody joins this community, whether you are staff, parents, volunteers, or even our colleagues and professionals that we work with. Everyone is valued for who they are and what they bring. And just to say that just around 40% of our volunteers are also parents within the project. So they come and they get support and they benefit, and then they decide to volunteer. Next slide, please. So our adaptation when COVID hit was rooted in our Citizens UK values. Obviously, the pandemic hit at the very heart of what we do. We reduce isolation, and we bring parents who are isolated and who are struggling out of their houses, and we bring them into the community. And we had lots and lots of activities every week going on. And when lockdown happened last March, all of that went out the window. But our adaptation is rooted in our Citizens UK values of integrity. We're very relational. We use courage and solidarity, kindness, and inclusion. And I've highlighted courage and kindness because these were very, very important at the time when we went into lockdown. Next slide, please. Okay, so our approach to work is, and I'm trying to not differentiate very much between parents, volunteers, and staff. The way that we work is that we listen to everybody. We listen to everybody's challenges. We then ask for what they think the solutions might be to those challenges. Everybody gets an opportunity, if they want it, to contribute to the solutions. And then what we can't do for ourselves, we ask for external support. And that really is key, and it runs throughout what we do. So with the staff team, I'll do the same. The staff do the same with parents. They do the same with volunteers. So when we went into lockdown, the first thing we did really was to listen to parents. What were the challenges that they were facing? Volunteers, staff, and so everybody was listened to. I think we listened to about 300 parents in total, and the issues that came out of that listening informed our response to what we did going forward. Next slide, please. So in the now, and I mean in the now since March, we looked at the capacity of individuals. So whether that is staff, what were they able to do alongside homeschooling, volunteers, how was this impacting on them? What were they able to give? And that was the same for parents. You know, what were they able to join online activities? What was the time that was best for them to do that? And so that all that information helps us to support people individually, but also to try and structure our community support. We have a wellness action plan, and that was used with especially volunteers and staff to find out what were the key things that they were struggling with, what were the signals, what were we looking out for, what would be helpful. And that wellness action plan, I think I submitted that, and people can have a look at that and if they want to use it. We talk to our funders all the time. And one of our funders, Guys and St. Thomas's, I remember having a meeting and saying, I feel like I'm a safeguarding officer for staff because I'm so worried and concerned about their well-being. And they gave us a pot of money, which allowed us to then provide some additional support. This was in the form of some additional sessions and training for both the staff, volunteers, and the parents. And we used the human givens approach, which seemed to really sit well within our community approach and community organizing. And again, there's a leaflet that I submitted that can be shared. We had those additional weekly activities, and we also were able to provide tailored individual support, whether that was therapy. Some people went for, one of our volunteers, I think, bought a bike because she was really worried about going around on public transport, etc. So everybody was given the opportunity to think about what would be the most appropriate support for them. And then, of course, we signpost people to additional support and activities. As I said earlier, that we listened to about 300 parents, and 90% of them needed a phone call every week. And we all work part-time, we're a very small team, and we have no capacity to provide that. So we then, enlisted our volunteers. And going forward, we know that developing parents and volunteers and their capacity to support others around mental health and well-being is very important. Next slide, please. I think it's the last one. And our response in the future, we're hoping to return to better. And by that, I mean that we will keep the things that have worked really well for us. I mean, we used to struggle so much around workshops and training because parents struggle with childcare, but, online where digital, access is possible, it is a lot easier. So we are going to do that whole thing again, to listen to parents, to volunteers, to staff, and harness and co-produce solutions. And key to that is going to be community-led support. So budding and mentoring for both parents and volunteers, so that they can support each other. They can build those networks of support within themselves, because we haven't been able to gather for such a long time. And that will also have some small community-led groups. And then we will share our best practice, whatever has worked well, with our colleagues and partners and people that we work with in other professions. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Josephine. Fantastic to hear that of the work that you're doing, and so much, I think, resonates with so many, and so fantastic to see the co-production piece and really listening to the challenges and enabling everyone to be part of the solution together to come to that. So fantastic. There's already comments coming in, so please do keep the chats coming in, and please do add in questions. I've seen some questions already starting, so we'll pick those up at the end. And I really just thought it was brilliant to think around this. How do we return to better? So learning, and obviously we don't want to keep everything that we're dealing with at the moment, but there are some things that we can bring as positive. So really nice to think about that as well. So I'm going to hand over now to Hannah, who's our next speaker. And Hannah's the chief exec at Trevi, which is a nationally award-winning women's and children's charities based in southwest England. And Hannah has been in the addiction field for over 20 years. She's worked in both the statutory and voluntary sector, and is particularly passionate about women's issues. So thank you so much for being here, Hannah, and I will hand it straight over to you.
Thank you very much. I believe I've got a presentation, if I can have that brought up, please. Great, thank you. So next slide, please. Oh, I was going to say that one threw me slightly. So yes, Trevi, we're a charity. We've been here in the Southwest for 28 years now, and our services, they're predominantly, we're working with women. We have services for women. We have a mix of residential and community services. So we have 2 residential homes. We've got one that I'm sure some of you will be familiar with, which is our mother and child residential rehab, where we support up to 10 women at any time with their children who are recovering from drug and alcohol addiction. And we've also got a residential family centre. And we have a women's centre in the community working with around 500 women living in Plymouth. So I guess the best thing to say is that the women and the children that we work with, we support, for them throughout this whole sort of pandemic experience, COVID has only been a priority for a sort of small minority. Actually, for us, it's been working with the impact of lockdown, especially some of our more vulnerable women, the impact on isolation, mental health, women that we're working with that are involved in children's social care, where suddenly any face-to-face contact with their children, that will move to online. So actually the impact of lockdown, the impact of COVID has been the sort of the biggest piece of our work. But right at the beginning, the drive from the staff working here in our services was they wanted to keep our services open as much as we could and to keep working with families and vulnerable women as well as we could. Next slide, please. Thank you. So our team, we are predominantly women, and I guess it's important to recognise that we are women that are juggling many other priorities. Lots of us are mothers, mothers of children of all ages, and we had sort of conversations amongst ourselves who we all sort of are very mindful of one another's challenges. So we've got some of us, myself included, that are trying to sort of juggle homeschooling, but then we've got other mums that are having to try and support their teenager, sort of 18, 19-year-old sort of adolescents through lockdown when they're wanting to be with their friends and get out and about. We've got other mums who've got children sort of at university, and so whatever our sort of circumstances, we've recognised it's been different but challenging for staff across the board. We have women working with us that have got other caring responsibilities, whether that's elderly parents, whether it's parents in care homes. And I think there's been a recognition that quite often women have had to really sort of bear the brunt of a lot of this during the pandemic. And that's certainly something we've seen here within the team. And yes, people have absolutely wanted to step up to the mark and do what it takes to keep our services open, but they've also needed that space, that capacity, that support to be able to look at what's happening in their home life and be able to also meet the needs of children, everyone else that sort of is putting on demands on them as women. Next slide, please. So one thing that I think has been sort of reflected in our service is that people, depending on where they're working in the organisation, have had very different work experiences. And we've had some people work from home more, and whilst from a sort of a safety point of view, that's been great. They've been able to sort of go into a lockdown and stay at home and not have to sort of have the risk of going into the workplace. Actually, it's brought with it some real challenges, and I've used that image because it's that sense of people bringing trauma into their homes. People, we are working with some women who've really been going through an awful lot of domestic abuse, sexual violence, mental health. We've really seen these issues escalate, and we've got staff members that suddenly those issues are now in their home. And how do you put boundaries in place? How, for many of us, our home, which is our sort of safe space, how do we keep that space safe when we're Zooming and calling and really trying to support women who are in extreme distress and crisis? Whereas those of us that have been going into the workplace, yes, there's been some real challenges around COVID and trying to sort of keep safe, and it does make you quite anxious, and you have to sort of go into society and be in the workplace, but you have connection. And I think at times I have to reflect that what's got me through this has been able to sort of, I've had to come into work, but that's been great because I can just connect with people, I can connect with the work I'm doing. So recognising that the experiences for the team are very different, therefore our responses had to sort of match those different experiences. Next slide, please. But I guess one thing that sort of, and I always feel bad saying this, I feel like I'm going to sort of, I don't know, tempt fate or something, but morale's actually quite good in our organisation. And I've been sort of, I wouldn't say puzzled by that, but I've been keen to understand that. We're going through some really difficult times. We're working with some really hard stuff under really difficult circumstances. Why is it all right? Why are people, what's getting us through this? And this concept, I think, is really interesting one. And it's sort of, it's described as, another way of sort of looking at it is the reason for being, ikigai. And it's a Japanese term. And I just think it sort of sums up, I suppose, what does work mean to us, and how purposeful can our sort of sense of work be? And when I talk to people in the team, they, more than ever, they've known the reason why they're doing what they're doing, and their strength, that they are, yes, work is hard, but they know the difference they're making. And that's been across the organisation, where they're coming into the care homes and keeping services running and keeping a sort of a safe space for women with their children, or whether it's in the community, phoning women and reaching out to them, and recognising there's a real purpose to what they're doing. And I think that, for me, it's really made me think, well, how does that work across our organisation? Where can we really hone in on the purpose? And I guess in some respects, celebrate the difference we make to people through the work that we do. And I have also had the team feedback that within their own lives, they've had a greater sense of gratitude, I suppose, what they do have. And again, it's how do we, in our conversations, in our meetings, really focus in on what can we be grateful for, and how can we really sort of value the work that we're doing. Next slide, please. But there are some practical things. So how do we care for the carers? And one of the things that we did early on in this sort of process, we reviewed our sick pay. I wanted the team to know, actually, if you do get COVID, if you do have to self-isolate, you'll be okay. That was an early thing that we did, and people have fed back. That gave them a sense of reassurance. They knew we cared about them. We made sure the home working policy was in place. The practical stuff, and sometimes I don't think about practical, I think about the big things and the nice concepts. Actually, people want to know they can pay their mortgage and that they will be okay. But simple gestures, and we send flowers to people on our team. And I do joke, sort of, I've got like a part-time job as a florist now, because every week there's you know, they've moved house and nan's died, they're off, you know, had a hospital, whatever it is. But actually, it's a really nice personal touch that just lets people know that we value them. And I think this experience has shown more than ever, has made us realise that our people are, that's what matters the most, because if we've got the people with us, working alongside us, we can sort of do anything. And I do think there's something about knowing your team. I hear ideas that people have brought in, and I think, oh, that will never wash with my team. And I know the stuff that does work, and I guess it's about us knowing we know our teams. And even if, you know, you don't, there will be people in your team that know your team, and that will be able to say, look, this is what matters, this is what they want, and being able to sort of hear that and sort of respond to their sort of particular needs. I suppose we've all been learning together, and I think through this, have had to learn a lot about how to support people and how to sort of be human in that process. And I think it's been, in many respects, quite humbling for us as an organisation, just to, you know, this is new territory for all of us, but together we can sort of navigate our way through. Next slide, please. I suppose it felt important to just recognise that we are where we are now, and I almost feel more nervous about the future than I do about the moment. I think when you're in crisis, everyone steps up to it, don't they? And yes, it's been a crisis for a long time, but that sense of national emergency, and everyone's like, yeah, we'll do it, we'll do what it takes. And yes, the tenacity the team have shown has really been remarkable. And I do think, we're tired, we're all tired, and actually this is that sense of, you know, it's a marathon, not a sprint. I mean, it's probably an ultra marathon, it's, you know, an Iron Woman. It feels like we've got a long way to go. It feels like we don't really know what it looks like. And I feel it's going to shift from this sort of, you know, we're managing a crisis, have to live in through some quite challenging times. So I guess I just recognise I'm not sat here thinking, you know, we're fine, everyone's happy, will be. I do feel worried. I feel more worried for the future in some respects, and I'm sort of talking to sort of managers, it's thinking, okay, how do we then sort of, you know, what do we do next? How do we move to the next phase? And I love what Josephine said, how do we return to better for all of us, the services we provide and the way we work with staff. Next slide, please. Oh, so that's the last one. I will just do a very quick shameless plug for a campaign that we're running at the moment, a Sheroes campaign, in the run up to International Women's Day. So we're trying to sort of celebrate awesome women. So if anyone wants to hop onto our website, for £5, you can nominate a Shero, and that can be just any woman who you know who's done something brilliant, and they'll get sent a rather nice badge and a certificate, and their name will be on our website. So please have a little look and nominate someone. Thank you very much.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Hannah. Such a lot to take in there. Your audio was a little bit breaking up at times, but I think we could get most of it. So I hope everyone on the call did as well, because it was really interesting, and a good shameless plug for something nice at the end. So I will have a look. And just some really good points. And Rachel and Jackie in the audience also agreeing, and your point about bringing trauma into home. I think we've seen that a lot across the board, but as you say, the different experiences of lockdown and everyone going through a different challenge means there is no answer that fits everyone, and actually working with the team that you know and supporting them. And I love that the sense of sending flowers and just small bits of gratitude, I think is really important. So thank you so much for that, and lots of food for thought with your actual practical steps as well. So I'm sure we'll come back to that with some of the panel questions, and I can see some questions already coming in, so please do keep adding those in. A quick reminder that please do keep the conversation going on Twitter if you want, using the 2 hashtags that are in the chat box. But I will move us swiftly on to our next speaker, which is Donna, and this is where we got into a bit of technical problems with some videos. So Donna and Charles both are having video issues today, which is part and parcel of COVID, working from home, as we know. So we are very pleased to have them for audio. So please excuse the fact that there's lack of video, but I think we'll be able to get exactly the same outcomes anyway. So I will hand over to Donna. Donna manages the Craigavon and Bainbridge Volunteer Bureau and oversees the recruitment, training and placements of volunteers with disability. And she's actively involved in community planning, embraces all opportunities to work collaboratively with all sectors of the community. The Bureau recruits, matches and places volunteers in the Craigavon and Bainbridge area with the local community, voluntary sector and statutory sector, providing ongoing support for volunteers and placement organisations. So again, thank you so much for being here. And Donna, I will hand over to you.
Hi, good morning, everybody. Thank you, first of all, so much for having me. I'm sorry you can't see me. Maybe that's a good thing, given that the old grey roots are sprouting up to say hello. However, I'm delighted to be part of this. Helen, you outlined what we do, and I'm not just to say yes. We recruit, support, train and place volunteers within our catchment area, and we work with organisations in all issues pertaining to good practice with volunteering, i.e. access NI, managing of volunteers, equal opportunities, disability, safeguarding, all that. So would have been very busy, and I'm currently delighted to be in receipt of a grant from the National Lottery Community Fund to fund what's called a bridge project. And these are amazing people that have very, very mixed disabilities, inclusive of all. Some of them have a brain injury, learning disability, visual impairment, severe mental health, may have had brain hemorrhages in the past, just to give you a few. Absolutely amazing people who were key to the setting up of the bridge project, because it was built at a grassroots level up, just as it should be, just as we always should never assume that we know what people want, that we ask people what we want. So here we were going along, and Donna was doing her training, and the referrals were flying in, and the placements were taking off, and the phones were going, and suddenly we're in the middle of a pandemic. Wow. And at first I struggled, and I thought, what do we do? You know, and something come to me on the 18th of March, and this thought come to me that people are our biggest resource. And you know what we have so much of? Fantastic volunteers who, for no monetary purpose, make a difference to their community because they want to. And I thought, how do I harness that? Came in the next day and had a Zoom meeting with the committee, the board of directors, and told them that I wanted to set up a coronavirus emergency volunteer project. And they asked me to say it a few times. I'm not surprised. And they're kind of think the how and the why and the where. But my thought was, in terms of all good governance, get the permission first, and then we'll look at the brass tactics. So when I outlined it, then I had a meeting with the staff. And finally, what I thought is, what is it people need? We need to listen to people. We can't rush in what we feel they need. I need to be speaking to people. So that was kind of, we sat down. We looked at things like good practice in terms of how to pull together guidelines. Volunteers were going to get involved, you know, about looking after themselves. PPE was paramount. Masks, sanitizers, gloves, you know, Access NI were required. Looking after people's well-being, but I'll go on to that just a wee bit in a minute. So at the end, I thought we've got to listen to people. But you know what happened very quickly? There's 188 volunteers on the Bridge project. And within 2 days, we had phone calls to say 150 had shielding letters. So those 150 people were having trouble accessing food, their prescriptions, and some of them, quite a majority of them, didn't have any family nearby. And those that did have family nearby were afraid in case they brought COVID. For some of these people, one lady particularly had cystic fibrosis. So, I mean, COVID for her would have been an absolute deadly, you know, virus to have got. So it kind of in itself developed in what people needed. So what I did then was, on the 21st of March, we pulled the governance and the logistics and the staff, and we looked at roles and responsibilities. I put a call out to volunteers, and within 24 hours, 173 volunteers registered. And I'm like, wow, I couldn't believe this. Some of these people were furloughed, some of the people were unemployed, some of the people had been out of work for years. But what there was a willingness to make a difference to our people on the ground. And I was just in awe of this. We didn't expect that response. It was wow, but it was fantastic, and it made me be proud to be part of this community development infrastructure, you know, that we have in our area that is driven by volunteers, and there's no doubt about that. The volunteer or the managers and the groups and the organisations do a fantastic job. I know they won't take umbrage at me saying volunteers are the milk's blood of our community. That is without a doubt that they are. So we sort of started to think, right, this is what, so the emerging needs became very quickly. People needed food, they needed prescriptions, and they needed someone to talk to. So very quickly we pulled together care boxes, which give people a staple meal for a couple of days, a good morning scheme, and that every person, each of those 150 people, got a daily phone call from one of our volunteer good morning scheme volunteers. They got that. And we worked with organisations who were already involved in delivering the prescriptions. And we helped them to get, we kind of got like 100 volunteers Access NI. I think it was in a week. Access NI were great. You're probably aware, I know you will be, that they set up a 24-hour turnaround, which was fantastic. And suddenly here we were, just to say too, we were able to work from our office, which was fantastic. We have a really big office, and the 3 staff were able to remain social distancing, and you know, it wouldn't have worked from home. You know, I needed to be at contacts when I needed them. You know, I needed the database. There kind of was the logistics of what would develop was so many volunteers picking up boxes all at different times, so they never met. There was the logistics of that. The staff packed the boxes. We had the volunteers in each area. So then we put together a database with everyone's names on it who needed help. So the volunteers were spread geographically. You know, looking back now when I'm talking about this, I'm thinking, how on earth they would do it? But you know what? we did do it. And as I say, what would happen is the database was when the volunteer dropped off the care box, they would let us know, and that would come off the database, and that would be sorted for the day. And that's kind of how it happened. Every day you went to this, and the systems told you who needed what today. I'm just thinking of this one wee darling gentleman when I rung him and I said to him, "What can I do for you?" And he says, "Can I just have my paper?" You know, that's all he wanted. He wanted his connection with the outside world. You know, he didn't want anything else. We put a few wee bits and bobs in for him, a wee treat. Everybody needs a wee treat. And one of our volunteers delivered, and still does over these 10 months, and because he's still shielding, delivered his paper to him every day. You know, that's a simple explanation. Then we had other people who lost their universal credit, blips in the system, had suddenly no money, couldn't get food, couldn't get food, couldn't ring, you know, local supermarkets and put an order in because they didn't have the food. So it was, and had young family. So those people needed 2 care packs a week. So they had to get that. So you're kind of looking, I suppose, 300 a week, 600 a month, 12, or, you know, well, I think we worked out roughly, I don't want to get caught up in figures and get myself confused. Roughly 8,500 deliveries have been made over the past 10 months. And 7,500 good morning calls have been made to people. You know, yes, we're still in COVID. Obviously, we do have a long way to come. But the idea that we're able to do this, that these volunteers stepped up to the plate, and, you know, that we were, although they didn't have physical contact with the people that were leaving, they were out in the community. We were all picking up food boxes and that. I was going to local charities, Tesco's and that. I would never ask, and I always say this, I would never ask a volunteer to do anything that I wouldn't do. So our staff was out with them. It was great in the warm weather. I have to tell you, in the snow and the rain, we were delivering 100 turkeys on Christmas Eve. My hands were cold like I'd never known. But you know what? There was 10 of us spread out doing this. And, you know, the community spirit with us, and the, you know, the willingness to and Christmas Eve being a time where family time, and, you know, the willingness to get out there and make sure that these people had a turkey on Christmas Day. I, for the rest of my life, will be in awe of that work. And I'm privileged to have been part of it. I really, really am. These are all the great things. I would be naive, and you would know if I said that there wasn't issues along the road. And of course there were. I had to make sure, I had to look after the staff's well-being, and the fact they were working in a way they'd never worked before. They'd completely moved away. They were carrying boxes, they were sorting boxes out, they were taking numerous phone calls. Mrs. B's groceries went to Mrs. D's groceries, and she was diabetic, right? Mrs. D can't have that box, you know. Those are the kind of, and they sound trivial, but obviously I know that you know, we needed to get those things right. So those kind of things happened along the road. I believe communication is the key to everything. And I had a short team meeting with the staff every single day for at least half an hour. And I kind of, how are you? How are you feeling? What's coming up for you? What are you struggling with? That was crucial. I truly believe you have to take people with you. I've done the same things with the volunteers. We had regular Zoom meetings, we had telephone calls, we had emails. When I sensed a fatigue in a volunteer, I asked them to take a break for a few weeks, told them absolutely appreciated everything that they had done, but I really felt that they needed a break, and that they would burn out. And they took me advice, and then they went away and they came back, you know, and I was so glad for that, because self-care is so important, you know. And I think about that wee quote, you know, when you're on an airplane, you know, when something goes wrong, whose oxygen do you put on first? And obviously you put your own on first, because you can't help anybody else unless you help yourself. So those were the key. Those were the key things for us in terms of what I also done was I kept in touch. Oh, sorry, firstly I left out. I contacted the National Lottery Community Fund, who were absolutely fantastic and equipped me with money in which I was able to buy PPE, food, and support volunteers without out-of-pocket expenses. I couldn't have done that without them. I'm so delighted that they give me that flexibility. I will be forever grateful that the funder supported me in this, for without the project wouldn't have been a success. The difficulties were, in the good mornings calls, people expressing how lonely they were, how hopeless they felt, and then, you know, the volunteers checking in with me and saying, you know, you felt so helpless, and that was difficult, because the bottom line is we could only do what we could do. But that's where great partnership work came in, where we felt that we needed to bring in expertise service, you know, like counsellors and the mental health teams and that, with people's permission, able to signpost. And there was an awful sense of people were so lonely and isolated. And when the people dropped off their car boxes, they would wave to them from the window, and they kind of build up a sort of rapport. And one of the lovely things that came out of it was some of the recipients that were getting the food boxes, they started sending in thank you cards to the wee volunteers that were, please don't mind to say me, we, I'm from Belfast and I always say we, hi and ever, cards to their individual volunteers. And we posted those out, you know, and they shared some of the messages with me, and it was amazing. This was the only outside contact they had with the outside world, you know, so they'd see Bob coming along, and you knew he was coming at 11 o'clock, and they'd stand back at the window and they'd shout out and say, what's the crack? You know, and Bob would say, I was up all night with a child, so you know how it is yourself, you know, and a rapport was built. And I thought that was fantastic. I really did. That really touched me. The volunteers in the Good Morning scheme, the people that used that kind of built up a rapport as well, and they would say, you know, what about the family and what's the crack, and did your daughter have your baby, and oh, what did you have, you know, you could see that community spirit building, and it helped to alleviate some of those emerging issues, like depression and anxiety, and you know, the desperate situation we were in, and the fact that people were losing family members, and obviously they weren't able to go to the services, and all that heart-rending stuff that we see every day. But we could only do what we could do, and I kept reiterating to the staff and the volunteers and to myself, listen here, there's only so much you can do, but you see, if you make a small difference, then you've done something right. So 10 months on, where are we? We're still doing it. The car packs are down to 50 a week. The good morning calls are still happening because people are very isolated. Moving forward for me, what have I learned in terms of the partnership work of working with the statutory sectors, the funders, volunteers, staff? For me, I believe that moving forward, we need to work together in a meaningful partnership to continue to build a shared sense of purpose and to make a difference to the most vulnerable members of our society. Together we stand, divided we fall. I have probably talked a wee bit. I hope you bear with me. I've just finished on one of my favourite quotes in the whole world, and it's from Mac Anderson, who was a great leader. And what he tells me is that a leadership starts with a willing heart, a positive attitude, and a desire to make a difference. And to me, that's what volunteering and community development is all about, and what we continue to be as an organisation. Thank you so much.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Donna. Fantastic to hear, and lots of things coming through the chat of people agreeing. And I think just going back to your beginning point is, yeah, people are our biggest resource. So really important to be talking and looking after staff and volunteers to make sure that we're able to do what we can do. And I think there's some good questions coming up around this, around how we do leadership burnout as well alongside this. So I will let the panel think about that before we come back to the panel discussion. And for the panel, please do look in the questions, because we've got some coming through, and we'll go around and pick those up in a minute. So fantastic to hear that. Thank you. I am going to move us on to our last speaker this morning before we go into the panel session. And we're really excited to have Charles here, who is a young person who's benefited from the Lottery Talent Match programme. And Charles is part of the Talent Match participation group, using voice to influence decision-making within the programme and at a local and national level around youth unemployment and social isolation. And along with Charles is Colette, who is the programme manager of Talent Match in Liverpool. She is passionate about her work with young people and has spent 25 years working to help vulnerable and excluded young people in the Northwest. Talent Match Plus is a coordinated programme responding to the needs of neat young people aged 15 to 29 who are disengaged from services within Liverpool City region. So without further ado, I will hand over to Charles.
Hello. I do have a presentation, if I could have that up, please. Okay, so yeah, it's just going to be a bit about me and then a little bit about Talent Match and what I did as well. So I'm Charles, I'm 20, I'm a participant at the Liverpool Talent Match. Probably move on to the next slide. It's got a bit more there. So a bit about where I was before I joined it. I didn't have the greatest experience at school, and I left pretty early on, didn't have many qualifications. And there was always a bit more of a pressure to find employment, to just make money, get on with life, even if you don't enjoy it, just go and do it. It didn't it didn't bode well, and I ended up being referred to YPAS for counselling. And the counsellor within YPAS knew about Talent Match, and she thought I would do really, really well on the programme, and I did. So that was a good thing. Next slide, please. So yeah, I got assigned with a mentor called Jenny. She was a really good match. So yeah, she just listened to me about everything. She took everything in, looked at what programs were on Talent Match, what would benefit me, and then signed me into them. I said yes to pretty much everything she offered me. And it was quite good because, like, on these, I realised quite quickly that, I'm not the only one in this situation, and I'd been made to feel like that previously. So that just added even more pressure. But, meeting people like me, and then also speaking to the mentors and everything like that, they were like, no, it's okay, like, you're not the only one. It was good, and it allowed me to, just relax, take me time, really enjoy what I was doing on Talent Match, so I could move on and keep building, skills and stuff like that. So yeah, what did I do? I'm looking through the slides, so sorry. So yeah, some of the things what I did, move on to the next slide. Okay, so yeah, of course we have the one-to-one face mentoring. Everyone gets assigned their own mentor. So yeah, of course mine was Jenny. And then she signed me on first to Roadmaps, which is it's a course with two of the other people on Talent Match who are called Naomi and Lindsay, and what it's based around is just working on emotions, how to control and regulate them. So say if you're an angry person, they'll break the steps down with you on how you can better assess that anger so it doesn't, explode in the end. It can also help build your self-confidence and things like that. And then I also did a cooking course, which was the last one I did before the pandemic hit. And it was really good. It was a short course, but it was really good and informative, and it had quite a lot of people in. It was quite a good thing socially because you got to interact with people as well, and I'd had a friendship group breakdown, so it was nice to have a new group there so I could build that confidence back up with talking to people and things like that. So yeah, that was good. And then the pandemic hit, which is the next slide. So yeah, everything went online, and during this time Roadmaps was still continuing, and they managed to move it all online. We completed it on Zoom. I think we got through about 6 sessions in real life, and then we had to do about 6 more on Zoom. but they actually did it really, really well. And even though it was online, they still managed to get it all done, and they'd even email us with the information afterwards so we could look back on it. And they were available pretty much 24/7 if we needed to ask any questions about it or didn't understand any of the material. And then after that ended, they actually offered me a little thing of where they made a Facebook group for the roadmaps. So I was able to join that, and then I would just post a little bit of information about me and how I found it, just so like new people coming into it was able to see that and realize that, oh, even though it's online, I can still get help from this and it'll still be good. So yeah, that's what happened. And then next slide would be more things what I did that was provided by Talent Match during lockdown. So they have a group called Urban Workbench, and it's something around like woodwork and crafts and things like that. Now, usually because not in lockdown, they would have like a little studio or things to take in, you could learn and do things, but of course, we have to do it over Zoom. So what they basically did was they made a stool, just a plain wooden stool, and they sent it out to all of us with paints and things like that so we could decorate it with. They gave us a prompt, and we could, decorate these and plan how we're going to decorate it and learn techniques and how to decorate them through Zoom calls, Zoom sessions. They also they gave us a live of how they were making the stools and things like that, of how they were cutting it with the wood cutter and everything. That was really interesting. And then obviously the participation group, which I did with Louise. That's still ongoing, I think. I have a bit of a bad memory, so. And then Advanced Solutions as well. I joined Advanced Solutions, which was really good. I unfortunately had to miss yesterday's one to prepare for this, but it's okay. They email you afterwards with all the information from it, so you can keep up. And then the employability support, I got assigned with Anne, who's really lovely, and she's been a massive help. She has been constantly, trying to find things for me to do, such as courses and, skill building and things like that. Which was, it was good. She's helped me get some more qualifications under my belt and things like that. So yeah, that was nice. The Talent Match International Young Persons Group. We're currently making an animation video, which is really interesting. It was nice to, see everyone's different creative styles and things like that, and also just to, I guess, what's the word? Brainstorm with everyone. That was really fun to do. So yeah, that was nice. Next slide. Okay, so yeah, one of the things about me is that I am trans. I am very openly trans. And one of the passions behind me is, support for other trans people and, LGBTQ people in general. So my mentor had more trans people assigned to her, but she didn't really have that much information. So she'd come to me a lot for help, which I was completely happy to provide. And it ended up with me helping support another participant who needed some advice on changing her name, everything like that. And I compiled a massive resource and sent her a big email with everything in it, what she needed. And she was able to change her name and do all of that. But the idea came about to do a trans support group, which is the next slide. So yeah, I run a trans support group through Talent Match with Louise. It's once a week, every Friday morning, and it's a mix of a social group and then a group with a purpose of creating a guide for professionals on how to better support trans people, such as languages, trans rights, things like that, just in general, on how to advise any trans person that might come to you, or say you're a doctor or anything like that, what type of language you should use and everything like that. So yeah, but again, it's also a social group, and often the conversation usually derails into what pets we have, but it's a fun little group where we can just connect and meet people that are in a similar situation and just gain some peer support. So yeah. Next slide. Okay, yeah, this is just more about that guide for professionals and things like that. So yeah, we've come quite far on that. We've got a lot of information, and we're just kind of finding the best way to compile it now, and what would be the best, I guess, form to put it in, whether we're going with a booklet, a leaflet. We're obviously probably going to have an online form, like a PDF or something like that. We're going to be doing that. Next slide. Okay, so this would be skills that I've learned on Talent Match. Next slide, please. Okay, so yeah, first coming into Talent Match, I didn't think I was that good at communication and things like that, but obviously, you know, since setting up the trans group and being in the social groups in general, it's like, no, I'm actually pretty okay at communicating. I might, you know, stumble over my words occasionally and forget what I'm saying, but in general, I'm pretty good at communicating with people, and I don't really, you know, have too much of a problem with that. I'm pretty good at giving advice and guiding people along, such as, you know, what I did with that other young person about, you know, being able to compile information and pass that on for her. So yeah, that was really fun for me to do, and actually quite surprised myself, because I've always just assumed that I wasn't really able to do things like that, but you know, I managed to do it, and it was pretty good. So yeah, people skills. My employment mentor, Anne, she did suggest a peer mentoring course at a college called Rotunda, I think, if I can remember that right. And I did apply, and next slide. I got accepted and I start in March. So I got accepted to do a peer mentoring course, finish off my functional skills, some individual capital development, and an employability skills course, which, you know, I think it's going to be good. It'll get under, you know, get more stuff under my belt, and hopefully it'll allow me to keep progressing and things like that. Next slide. Okay, so yeah, this is my ending bit. My hopes for the future will just be to complete my courses, and, you know, obviously keep working, you know, with, you know, Louise and Talent Match, and, you know, if they want if they want to still work with me and stuff like that, I'm happy to do that, you know, more than happy. You know, and obviously for the pandemic to, you know, end and stuff like that, but, you know, being on Talent Match and, you know, learning skills and things like that, and realizing that I'm actually quite good at communicating and helping new people, it kind of gave me the career opportunity of becoming a mentor myself. You know, I've always kind of had the idea of working with helping people and things like that, but being on Talent Match, it really showed me that actually, no, I've got the skills and I've got the capability to do it. And, you know, I've experienced this now. I've seen how mentors have worked and through how they've worked with me and stuff like that. And it's like, actually, no, you know what? Yeah, I could probably do that, and I'd probably really enjoy doing that. You know, it's gonna be a long road, but I'm happy to do that because I know now that I'm gonna enjoy it, and it's something that I want to do. So yeah, let's hope I can do that. So yeah, that's it from me, really.
Brilliant.
So yeah.
Thank you so much, Charles. And you'll see from the chat, everyone saying how thank you so much for sharing. What a great story, which I completely agree with and concur in. Fantastic. And I'm sorry you had to miss your session yesterday. I hope you can catch up, but thank you so much for doing this. And amazing to see how much you've done over the COVID period as well, showing that COVID and the changes don't need to stop you on your journey and engaging in that. So thank you so much. Huge amounts to take on there. So we're going to open up into the panel discussion, and I believe Emily from the National Lottery Community Fund Evaluation Team will slide in to the screen at some point if my colleagues behind the scene do their magic, so she will join us as well for this, and we'll go through some of the questions that have been asked to the group. So if you do have questions that you haven't yet asked, please do type them in the question box. While we wait for Emily to join and to answer all of them, I'm just going to pick up, there was a question specifically to Josephine about the human givens approach. And if you had any more information about that, Josephine, I don't know if you just wanted to answer that quickly.
So I actually I had sent a slide. There was a slide about it, but it's something that looks at all your emotional needs and what and it gives you like this. It's like a individual issues that you need to look at, the need for privacy, connection with other people, having a community. It really gives you a breakdown of different areas of your life that contribute to your well-being. And so I would suggest that, hopefully maybe Emily or Scott or somebody can share that resource with people so that they can see. And there's a leaflet that accompanies it, and it tells you, and it gives, you can actually do a little assessment of yourself to see where you're at. And it was so useful. I mean, the human givens approach, I have to say, I did a short course, and there was something about resetting your brain. When you're upset, we work with so many parents who are living in very difficult situations in really small spaces. And, you've got 2 kids and you're really upset. What do you do? And some of the things are really weird, but they do work. And I remember being upset earlier in the pandemic, and I did this 7-11 breathing. Basically, you breathe in for 7 and you breathe out for 11. The idea is you breathe in and you breathe out for longer, and it resets your brain. And it worked for me. And there's lots of other odd things, but because we work with parents of young children, they're always happy to give it a go. And it really works. So please do have a look at that resource that I have shared with the National Lottery Community Fund.
Fantastic, and we'll make sure that we're getting the links shared alongside this as well. And I do, breathing and the 7-11, as you say, they seem like little things, but actually they can be really powerful at supporting. We now have Emily on the panel as well. So welcome, Emily. Emily is an evaluation manager at the National Lottery Community Fund. I don't know if you just wanted to give just a quick overview of the work that the evaluation team have been doing about the evidence around staff well-being. And introduce yourself any more than I have just done.
Hello everyone, nice to see you all and to hear from all the presenters today. So we have a number of very large programmes that have a corresponding national evaluation that go along with that. And what we did was, when COVID began, myself and some of the others that work with me on my team, we started to pull across from our programmes and our evaluation contracts learning around how services, projects, programmes, staff, beneficiaries were being affected and responding to COVID-19. And we particularly focused upon those programmes that addressed multiple disadvantage. Sorry, that noise was my post coming through the door. Another of the benefits of working at home. And what we pulled quite a lot of evidence from particularly Health Through Crisis, Women and Girls Initiative and Fulfilling Lives, and found that staff were very much finding a lot of impact upon their well-being, and a lot of the projects and services and program staff and leaders were very much trying to respond to recognising the impact upon staff, the impact, as Hannah talked about dealing with trauma, maybe experiencing personal individual trauma or difficult circumstances at home while you're working without your peer colleagues around you to just have that little moan, offload, laugh with, to help, dissipate the impact of the pandemic and the work that's taking place. So we pulled across from these programmes quite a lot of evidence, and I've summarised it in a document which I shared in the chat. So we looked at things like the impact of trauma, vicarious trauma upon staff wellbeing, and also volunteers. We mustn't forget about volunteers. We looked at burnout. There's a whole range of resources within that document that others can access. Most of them are available online. And what's really important, I'm going to stop in a minute, Helen, it's that sometimes the focus is upon ourselves as individuals to manage our staff well-being, to do the dreaming, to do the breathing, to manage our work and home life balance. And while those are very important steps, it's not sustainable, and there needs to be a multi-strand approach to staff well-being and volunteer well-being, which includes organisations themselves taking responsibility, revisiting their policies, their flexible working, their sick leave policies under COVID-19. What are the opportunities for peer support? Is there more opportunity for one-to-one support from a line manager? And there's a question there about leaders. Well, if these leaders are supporting organisations, leading on changing policies, leading on staff wellbeing, of course, that's a lot for them. So some of the same principles apply to them, and it's about looking at each in their individual role and what is needed in relation to their well-being, because it's a bit like that metaphor of when you're on the plane, you put your own oxygen mask off, make sure you're okay before you can help anybody else. And there's also, in this multi-strand approach, there's a third strand, which is funders. So that's people such as the fund. So when we're receiving grants, interest or grant applications, funders such as ourselves need to be asking, what's your approach to staff wellbeing? And that includes everybody, the leaders, the managers, people who deal directly with beneficiaries, volunteers, beneficiaries themselves. And we also need to be sharing any promising practice, supporting any positive developments, so that we see this multi-strand approach to staff wellbeing implemented, and one that is empowering for everybody involved.
Fantastic. Thank you, Emily. And I know you've shared the link in the chat box as well, but it's well worth a read for some more of that detail. And as I said, please do type in questions on that as we go. And you picked up a piece around the leadership burnout as well within that multi-strand. So I just thought it was a good opportunity to open it up to the panel and just answer the question from Aisha around dealing with leadership burnout. If we're looking after our staff, who looks after leadership, and best practices for leadership burnout. So any thoughts from the rest of the panel? Hannah. Oh, you're on mute still, Hannah.
Hello, hi. I guess this probably isn't the perfect answer at all, but I'm very aware that how I sort of behave sets the tone for how others will in the organisation. So I'm not naturally someone who will take things easy. I could quite cheerfully be in work early, stay work late, work weekends. But if I do that, then the expectation is that's the culture that's created. I'm almost forced to care for myself because I'm trying to care for my team, if that makes sense. So although it doesn't come naturally to me, and I do a 4-day week because I've got a young family, and I have to try and not work on my Wednesday, because otherwise the message I give to the whole team is, don't have any boundaries and work all the time. And I'm very much work in progress, but the driver is my team will see what I do. And in a strange way, that then does create the mechanisms for me to have self-care. So I want my staff team to all engage in supervision, but unless I have it, they won't. So I have external supervision. I do all of those things. And although sometimes it's not easy to sort of care for yourself, the driver is I know that others will see what I do and see that sets the tone for the organisation. So I think that when I talk to other people in sort of positions of leadership, I think, if you want the little voice on your shoulder to sort of guide you in the right way, you just know that the rest of the team are watching you and sort of seeing this is how this organisation works.
Thanks, Hannah. Colette? Oh, you're still on mute, Colette.
Yes, didn't want to switch off, technical issues. So for me, we work within a large organisation. Our organisation's been established over 130 years, and it's been very much leadership driven. So it has to come from the board, it has to come down through the chief exec, down to the senior management team, to the staff, to the volunteers, and to the beneficiaries. And ours is very much it is culturally embedded, that support for staff and for leadership. So as it comes down, it also comes back up. Personally, myself and my family, we're just recovering from COVID. I have 4 members of my family all at the same time, from my granddaughter, my husband, my son, myself, all diagnosed and tested positive for COVID, and we have had a time and a half. My chief exec phoned me every single day. My HR people checked in with me. I carried on very much like you, Hannah, doing my best as I can, thinking, the emails need answering. and I've told you, close your laptop, rest, get yourself better. Basically, put your oxygen mask on. With the team, we've done the same, but we also have within our organisation policies, you know, we have external supervision, we have access to a very robust supervision, HR support. We also have looked at some of the stuff, the practices that we've put in place to support young people. We've put them in place to support staff. So we've sent out welfare packs and little rescue packs to young people, just to cheer them up. How are you feeling? Keeping in touch. And we've done that the same with our own staff. So for me, it's very cultural. It's embedded in the organisation. And we have survived. We also have to hold our hands up and say, yeah, today I'm really focused, I'm going to get my work done. But at the same time, we also are on Google, you know, do cows have friends? So we have to recognise that sometimes we just have to shut things down, take a walk, take 5 minutes out, refresh ourselves, and then you know, accept that we're human. This is unprecedented. Things are going to have to change. There's all this pressure on, and we just have to sort of forgive ourselves a little bit and just apply some self-care.
Yeah, I think so important, self-care as well, and showing that to others, and leading by example. Josephine, I think were you going to come in? Did you want to come in?
I was going to come in, and I don't want to repeat everything that Hannah and Colette have said. I agree completely. But for me, I suppose leading a mental health project, I also share how I'm feeling. I talk to my team and to the parents. I'm nothing special. I'm just the same as everybody else. And when I'm having a hard day, I will tell the team. Or if I'm having, you know, I had a family crisis in the middle of the pandemic, and I took some time off because I want them to know that if they're struggling, they need to look after themselves. We have this exercise where we have like 2 jugs. One is empty and one is full. You wake up in the morning and that is you, the jug, you're pouring, your children, homeschooling. How do you refill your jug? So you do that. The other thing that we did in the team, obviously because it was unprecedented, is we take a very team approach. I have a very flat kind of structure, and I talk to the team about, you know, how we can survive, how can we go through this together. So we had to refocus people's objectives. So I say to people, you need to think about your work, think about your capacity, and give me 3 things, priorities that you think you need to focus on during this time that you can actually do alongside your work. So they were in charge of their own priorities. And then we communicated with our parents and our volunteers and explained that the situation has changed and things were slightly different. But there was also an opportunity for development. So we kind of restructured slightly. Where I was meant to be supporting 9 people, I couldn't do it. So then a couple of my colleagues also stepped up, and it was development, but we were doing it together, knowing that we were just kind of managing during this time. But I also know that, you know, as an individual, as a leader, there are things that I would not share with the team. So I've got a mentor, I've got a coach, where I can take some things when I'm struggling, and I don't think it's appropriate to share with the team. I mean, there are things like taking the vaccine. I mean, over 75% of our parents are from Black and minority ethnic communities. They are not interested in the vaccine, and neither was I. But then one day I got this text, and the text just offered me this vaccine, and I took it, and I made such a fuss at the center. I said, take a picture of me. I want to share this with my community. And I didn't tell them the vaccine is safe because I don't know. I just told them, I wrote a little blog to accompany the picture to say, look, this is why I did it. I hope I can go and see my family back home. I want to be around to see my grandchildren, you know. And ultimately, when I reflected, I realized that every time I'm unwell, I go to the doctor. So actually, I trust science. So there are certain things, that kind of modeling that comes with being a leader, that you have to model, but it's not easy. It's not easy. And I'm just open. I just talk to them and I tell them when I'm not sure, when I don't know, I say, I don't know.
Fantastic, thank you. And I kind of reflecting on all those answers, I would completely agree. And I think at the National Lottery Community Fund, we've been very supportive to staff and understanding, and being able to be flexible through that, but also leadership, understanding that. And I think there's something, one of the things that we're talking about, that kind of returning to better, actually I think it's humanized people a lot more, because you understand a lot more. Everyone has completely different backgrounds, contexts, but understanding that helps us be a kinder, more supportive environment in general. And as a leader, I think people appreciate seeing the different backgrounds and understanding your challenges as well. So hopefully some of those have answered some of your questions, Aisha. Some really good snippets in there of some good examples as well of support. So hopefully people can take those forward. I'm conscious that we are close to running out of time. I just think it's worth picking up Holly's question around volunteers. So we've talked a bit about staff wellbeing, but encouraging volunteers to read group update emails and commit to sessions in advance. Any suggestions for panelists of how to encourage that? And I suppose any other thoughts or reflections on volunteer wellbeing as we've been going through the session. And I suppose it's the challenge of asking volunteers to sign up in a very fluid, turbulent time is quite a challenge. So does anyone have any good suggestions for Holly? Colette.
Very early on, when we went into this pandemic, we had 700 young people we were working with, and ours is a voluntary program. They come onto the program voluntarily. But what we did was we asked our mentors to speak to our young people, to ask them how they wanted to be contacted, how often they wanted to be contacted. Was it appropriate? I know that for some of my young people, my greatest fear was that they were locked in their home, and that environment was not the safest place for those young people. So I think it's about asking what they want and not giving. I mean, young people very much were in the here and now. So they weren't thinking 2-3 weeks away. They were thinking what's going to happen, in a few hours' time, tomorrow. There was a lot of overcrowding. There was a lot of issues. Safeguarding never stopped. Crisis never stopped. Young people going hungry never stopped. 37% of ours live on their own. So the loneliness. So we had to find out the best way of communicating with them, how regularly they wanted it to happen. And actually, do you just want to text? Do you need a phone call? Is it too intrusive? What's the best time? We also currently we work with 9 till 5. Now our days have opened up to accommodate flexible working hours for our staff, so they can homeschool and that. So we can now also engage with young people of an evening. And we put in an awful lot. Charles spoke before about some of the personal social development, moving everything online, and the roadmaps program. And we were very fluid, very flexible, but we focused on well-being for young people, but at a time that suits them, in a way that suits them, and that they can adapt and engage with us. So I think it's about asking what is best for that individual, weekly, monthly, whatever, and how often they want to engage. Thank you.
Great. Josephine.
Yeah, I was going to say that for us, our volunteers, the strongest thing is the relationships that we have within our community. So that includes our volunteers. And so again, we do the same thing. We listen to them, we ask them, as Colette said. But I was going to say, for us, we actually, through listening to our community, we identified new opportunities. So we tried new things, like having like a writing group, and parents were talking about struggling with homeschooling their children. So there was a tutoring opportunity. And then we said to volunteers, well, these are the things that are coming through. It's like, what is your interest? What would you be interested in doing? And then training them so that they can do that, because everything had changed from face-to-face to online. So, everything, as long as you listen to people and you communicate with them, again, how would they prefer to be to communicate, but also what is their capacity, because that changes. Somebody that could do one morning a week might not be able to, and they could only do 1 hour a day. So it's sort of those things all taken into consideration.
Great, thank you, Josephine. Really, really good points. And Emily, I think you've got your
Yeah, just building upon what both Josephine and Colette have said, I mean, my suggestion would be, knowing what I know from evidence and looking at how projects are working across the fund, is that with the situation with the volunteers that's been outlined by the person in the chat, sorry, I can't remember what that person's name is, I would suggest taking a very pragmatic response, going with what they are offering. And as Josephine and Colette have talked, that communication, that co-producing with them is really, really important, getting their buy-in. And of course, if they want to work differently, there's likely to be some gaps in their previous roles that the volunteers might have done. And I would suggest working with them to look at their ideas for how those gaps could actually be addressed. Because if they've done that work in the past, they'll be very knowledgeable about that. And that might help, as Josephine was alluding to, drawing them in, and as Colette was saying, making them feel part of the organisation, so that hopefully you can get a path together. I suppose the word at the moment is roadmap. Get a roadmap for how you work with your volunteers moving forwards in a way that gives the service and beneficiary and everyone what it requires, but also fits with the volunteers.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Holly. Hopefully that is helpful, and I would echo the kind of the co-production and support and understanding what the communication with volunteers to understand what they can give, and being kind of clear on how they're supporting it and working forwards. So hopefully that's been helpful. I'm conscious of time, so we're almost coming to the end. I just noted that Jane also put in a comment about she'd be really interested in benchmarking sick leave with fellow charities of a comparable size, which I think sounds fascinating. I actually don't know if that is possible. I'm seeing nodding heads, so I don't know if that is there. Yes, Hannah, do you want to, is there anything you'd add to that? Oh, you're on mute, Hannah.
Just to say, if anyone does want to contact me about what we've done around our sick leave, I'm quite happy to share that. So yeah, by all means get in touch. I'm quite open about these things, so yeah, more than happy to. And interestingly, I have to say, since we brought it in, we have just had, I think, maybe like one person have minutes. I think there was an anxiety from the board, and I think it's always the case for charities, isn't it? You worry about what might happen, but almost the sort of comfort of having it gave people maybe a bit more peace of mind. I don't know, but we just haven't had to. It has had absolutely no impact at all, apart from make people feel more valued, more cared for, and less worried about their own future. So if anyone's considering doing it, I would say do it, but by all means get in touch if you want to talk through any of the logistics around it.
Fantastic. Thank you, Hannah. I'm sure people will take you up on that, and I think there is something we've also seen around our kind of carers leave that we have in the lottery, and allowing people to work and have that space and time, because it is unprecedented experiences that everyone is suffering from. So supporting our staff, and actually that enables them to bring back and give more at a time when they're able to, which I think all our staff are fully committed to the aims of the organisation. So allowing that support at that time is really key. So thank you so much to everyone for joining us today. Really hope you've found it useful. I know we've just lost Charles, but hopefully Charles will come back in before we end. Wanted to just say a huge thank you to all our speakers. Oh, Charles has come back, brilliant. So Hannah, Josephine, Charles, Donna, thank you so much, really inspiring, and the work you do is phenomenal. And I think really good insight in there, and hopefully everyone listening has had bits they can take away. Thank you also to Colette and Emily for being on the panel and to giving such good answers to some of those challenging questions. I think kind of thinking through the session and the bits, I really love that bit about returning to better and really trying to bring in some of this practice that we can take forward when hopefully we are back into a bit more of normality. Continuing to share best practice, I think so key across charities in the community sector, really supporting each other and supporting our volunteers and staff. People being our biggest resource, Donna, I think, yeah, front and centre, and so true, and supporting and looking after them and ourselves is really key. And I think the co-production and the fact that we are all different and we all have different needs, different challenges at different times as well. So working with each other to identify how we support each other, and also signposting to those areas of support that are already out there across the organisation, and a flag to do read Emily's report. Really interesting evidence coming through from the broader funding that we have had across the board. So huge thank you to everyone for joining us. Again, huge thank you to the panel, and really hope you've enjoyed it. This will be recorded and subtitled, I believe, and then put on the YouTube channel, so you feel free to share it with others who are interested, and please do come back and look for future webinars that we have. I actually meant to look up what the next one is and I can't remember, but actually there's a plug for Communities Can on, I think it's the 24th of March is a big day looking at how communities have come together since the COVID outbreak a year on. So please do look up to that, sign up. It should be a really interesting day, and please continue to share and support each other and yourselves. Thank you so much, and I will draw us to a close then. Thank you all.